June 4th, 1942. Just before sunrise. The Pacific Ocean north of Midway Atoll. The sea looks calm, almost empty. Long waves roll under a pale sky. The horizon is clear. There is no sign of danger. No smoke. No gunfire. No movement that suggests a battle is about to begin. Far below deck, engines hum softly. Steel vibrates. Men move carefully through narrow passageways. On Japanese aircraft carriers, pilots finish their last checks. Helmets are adjusted. Maps are folded. Orders are repeated in low voices. Everything feels controlled, planned, certain. Japan's fleet is at the height of its power. For aircraft carriers move together across the ocean. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. These ships have already reshaped the war. They struck Pearl Harbor. They destroyed Allied bases across the Pacific. Their pilots are experienced, confident, deadly. From the Japanese point of view, this operation should be routine. Midway is small, isolated, weak. Once it falls, the United States Navy will be forced to respond. When it does, the Japanese carriers will destroy it. That is the plan. Clean, precise, final. On the flight decks, aircraft are armed. Bombs are loaded. Fuel hoses snake across the steel. Crewmen work fast, but without panic. They believe they control time. They do not know they are already late. Hundreds of miles to the east, another fleet waits. There are no signals, no radio chatter, no visible movement. American aircraft carriers sit silent in the open ocean. USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, USS Yorktown. Their crews have been awake for hours, some for days. Pilots sit beside their planes. Some smoke, some stare at the deck. Others write quick letters they may never send. They know what is coming. They know the odds. Many of them will not return. They are here because of information the enemy does not know has been stolen. Below decks, intelligence officers replay the same facts again and again. The date, the location, the timing. Everything depends on accuracy. If even one detail is wrong, the fleet will be exposed and destroyed. There will be no second chance. As the sun rises, Japanese aircraft lift off toward Midway. Their engines roar into the sky. From above, the atoll looks quiet, small, defenseless. Bombs fall. Buildings explode. Runways burn. Smoke rises into the morning air. Japanese pilots report success. But Midway is not the real target. Back on the carriers, confusion begins to grow. Reports from scouts are delayed. Messages arrive incomplete. Somewhere beyond the horizon, something feels wrong, but no one can yet see it. Orders are issued, then revised. Aircraft are brought back down. Bombs are removed. Torpedoes are loaded. Fuel lines reconnect. The decks grow crowded. Dangerous. Time starts to compress. On the American carriers, engines start. Aircraft roll forward. Deck crews signal. One by one, planes lift into the sky and disappear eastward, flying low over the water. They are not attacking a base. They are hunting ships. Most of these pilots have never seen an enemy carrier before. Many are flying outdated planes. Some will be shot down before they can even attack. They know this. Still they go, because if they fail, the war may end here. Above the Pacific, two forces move toward each other, unseen. One believes it controls the battlefield. The other is gambling everything on a single moment. Neither side yet understands how close history is to breaking. Within hours, the balance of the Pacific War will shift forever. But right now, in the early light of June 4th, the ocean is still calm, and the deadliest mistake of the war is already in motion. The road to Midway did not begin in the Central Pacific. It began years earlier, with fear, ambition, and memory. Japan entered the Second World War, believing time was its enemy. The nation lacked oil, steel, and many raw materials needed to fight a long conflict. Japanese leaders looked at the United States and saw an industrial giant that could outproduce any rival if given enough time. For Japan, delay meant defeat. The answer, they believed, was speed. In December 1941, Japan struck first. The attack on Pearl Harbor was meant to cripple the U.S. Navy in one decisive blow. Battleships burned in the harbor. Aircraft were destroyed on the ground. For a brief moment, it seemed the plan had worked. But aircraft carriers were not there. That fact would soon matter more than anyone realized. In the months that followed, Japan expanded rapidly. Hong Kong fell. Singapore surrendered. The Philippines was overrun. Wake Island, Guam, and countless smaller positions collapsed. Japanese forces moved like a wave across Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Each victory reinforced the same belief. The enemy was unprepared. Resistance was weak. Momentum was unstoppable. For the United States, the situation looked grim. The Pacific Fleet was damaged. The Army was still mobilizing. Public shock from Pearl Harbor had not yet turned into confidence. American commanders knew they could not defend every position. They needed time to rebuild, time to train, time to think. Yet time was exactly what Japan intended to deny them. By early 1942, Japanese planners began debating their next move. Some wanted to push south toward Australia. Others wanted to secure the perimeter and force the Allies into negotiation. At the center of this debate stood Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet. Yamamoto understood the danger better than most. He had studied in the United States. He knew its factories, its population, its capacity for war. He believed Japan could win only if it destroyed the U.S. Navy completely, especially its aircraft carriers. That became his focus. Midway Atoll entered the plan because of its position. It sat halfway between Asia and North America. From there, American aircraft could threaten Japanese operations. More importantly, Yamamoto believed an attack on Midway would force U.S. carriers into battle. It would be the trap Japan had wanted since Pearl Harbor. The plan was complex. Too complex. Japanese forces would attack Midway. At the same time, another force would move toward the Aleutian Islands as a diversion. When American carriers rushed to defend Midway, they would be detected and destroyed by Japan's superior carrier fleet. On paper, the logic was sound, but the plan relied on secrecy and perfect coordination. Meanwhile, the United States was changing in ways Japan could not see. After Pearl Harbor, American intelligence focused intensely on Japanese communications. In darkrooms in Hawaii, cryptanalysts worked around the clock. Messages were intercepted, compared, tested, and broken piece by piece. Progress was slow, frustrating, incomplete, but it was enough. By May 1942, U.S. intelligence had a growing picture of Japanese intentions. A target referred to as AF appeared again and again in intercepted messages. Analysts suspected AF meant Midway, but suspicion was not certainty. To confirm it, American officers took a risk. Midway was ordered to send an unencrypted message stating it was short on fresh water. Soon after, Japanese messages reported that AF was suffering from water shortages. The doubt vanished. Midway was a target. With this knowledge, Admiral Chester Nimitz faced a decision that could decide the war. His carrier force was smaller. His pilots were less experienced. If the intelligence was wrong, he would lose everything. But if it was right, Japan's confidence could become its weakness. As Japanese ships moved eastward, believing the enemy was blind, American carriers quietly took their positions. The battle was coming, and both sides believed they were the ones setting the trap. Long before the first bomb fell, the Battle of Midway was already being fought. It was not fought with ships or aircraft, but with paper, numbers, and patience. In a secure building at Pearl Harbor, U.S. Navy codebreakers worked in near silence. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and fatigue. Men and women leaned over desks covered in notes and message fragments. Japanese naval code were complex, deliberately confusing and constantly changing. Every solution created new questions. They did not need perfection. They needed enough. Japanese planners believed their communications were secure. Messages moved across the Pacific every day, filled with details about movements, fuel, aircraft, and timing. To Japanese commanders, these were invisible to the enemy. To American intelligence, they were pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. The picture that formed was alarming. The Japanese fleet was preparing for a major operation, multiple forces, multiple objectives, and a central strike aimed at a location known only as AF. Once AF was confirmed as Midway, the meaning of the plan became clear. Japan intended to draw the remaining American carriers into a decisive battle and destroy them. This was exactly what Admiral Chester Nimitz expected Japan to try. Nimitz was calm by nature, but the information in front of him left little room for comfort. He commanded fewer carriers. His pilots were brave, but many were inexperienced. Japanese naval aviators were veterans of years of combat. Their reputation alone carried weight. Still, Nimitz trusted the intelligence. He chose to act not as a weaker force, but as a hidden one. Instead of defending Midway openly, he positioned his carriers northeast of the atoll, out of sight, out of range, waiting. The plan depended on timing down to the hour. American aircraft would have to strike, while Japanese decks were crowded and vulnerable. If the timing failed, the carriers would be exposed. Japanese planning moved in the opposite direction. Admiral Yamamoto believed deception was complete. The diversion toward the Aleutians would confuse the Americans. Midway would fall quickly. Then the U.S. carriers would appear, desperate to respond. What Yamamoto did not know was that his forces were spread too far apart. His main battleship force sailed hundreds of miles behind the carriers. Submarines assigned to scout American harbors arrived late. Reconnaissance gaps appeared, unnoticed. Each small flaw added weight to the outcome. On June 3rd, American patrol aircraft spotted elements of the Japanese invasion force. The reports confirmed what intelligence had predicted. The enemy was coming. The final pieces locked into place. Orders were issued quietly. Pilots were briefed. Aircraft were armed. No speeches were made. There was no need. Everyone understood what was at stake. For the Americans, there was no retreat plan. At dawn on June 4th, Japanese aircraft rose from their carriers and struck Midway. From their perspective, the attack went well. Damage was done, but the base was not destroyed. Another strike would be needed. This single detail changed everything. Japanese commanders now face a choice. Prepare a second attack on Midway, or rearm aircraft to strike ships if American carriers appear. They chose flexibility. Aircraft were brought back down. Weapons were swapped. Fuel hoses returned to the decks. The carriers entered their most dangerous state. Meanwhile, American aircraft were already in the air. Torpedo squadrons flew low and slow, searching for the enemy. They were scattered. Coordination failed. Communication was poor. One by one, they found the Japanese fleet. What followed was sacrifice without reward. Fighters and anti-aircraft fire tore apart torpedo planes. Crews were lost almost entirely. Very few torpedoes found their targets. From above, unseen, dive bombers kept flying. They were late. They were low on fuel. They were close to turning back. Then they saw the ships. Below them, Japanese carriers turned into the wind. Their decks were crowded. Fuel lines ran openly. Aircraft sat armed and exposed. In that moment, the invisible battle ended, and the visible one began. At 10:22 a.m., everything happened at once. American dive bombers broke through the clouds almost by accident. They had followed a Japanese destroyer at full speed, assuming it was racing to rejoin the fleet. Instead, it led them straight to the heart of Japan's carrier force. Below them were three carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, sailing in formation. They were completely unprepared for what was coming. Japanese fighters were low, chasing torpedo planes that had already been destroyed. Anti-aircraft guns were focused near the sea. The sky above the carriers was nearly empty. Then the bombs fell. A single bomb struck Kaga near the bridge. Another tore through Akagi. Seconds later, Soryu was hit. Explosions ripped through hangar decks packed with fueled aircraft and live ordnance. Fire spread instantly, uncontrollable, fed by aviation fuel. Within minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 frontline carriers were burning wrecks. Japanese crews fought desperately. Damage control teams rushed in. Firefighting systems failed. Smoke poured into command spaces. Orders became impossible to communicate. What could not be extinguished had to be abandoned. Admiral Nagumo stood on the deck of Akagi, watching his flagship die. The shock was absolute. Only one carrier remained operational. Hiryu. Its commander reacted with speed and clarity. While the other carriers burned, Hiryu launched a counterattack. Japanese aircraft found the American carrier USS Yorktown. Bombs struck the flight deck. Smoke rose. Fires broke out. To Japanese pilots, the ship appeared fatally wounded, but Yorktown refused to die. Within hours, American crews had repaired enough damage to resume flight operations. When Hiryu launched a second strike, its pilots believed they were attacking a different carrier. They weren't. Torpedoes slammed into Yorktown's side. The ship lost power and began to list. This time, the damage was real. Yorktown was eventually abandoned. Yet even as she drifted, American aircraft were already on their way. Late in the afternoon, dive bombers found Hiryu. The pattern repeated. Bombs struck the deck. Fires exploded below. By nightfall, the last Japanese carrier was doomed. In one day, Japan had lost 4 fleet carriers. The most experienced naval aviators in the world were gone. Aircraft were destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Years of training vanished in hours. The Japanese Navy had been built around carrier power. Now that power lay at the bottom of the Pacific. The battle continued for days, submarine attacks, air patrols, cleanup operations. But the outcome was already decided. Japan retreated. Midway remained in American hands. The cost was heavy. The USS Yorktown would later sink. Hundreds of American sailors were dead, but the balance of the war had shifted. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Japan was on the defensive, and it would never fully recover. When the smoke cleared over the Pacific, the ocean looked calm again, but beneath the surface, the damage was irreversible. Japan's carrier force did not just lose ships at Midway. It lost people, highly trained pilots, veteran deck crews, squadron leaders who had survived China, Pearl Harbor, and the Indian Ocean raids. These men could not be replaced quickly. Some could not be replaced at all. The Imperial Japanese Navy had spent years building elite naval aviators. Training was long, selective, and brutal. Now, in a single battle, that system was shattered. The United States noticed the difference almost immediately. In the weeks after Midway, Japanese air attacks became cautious, less coordinated, less aggressive. Pilots made mistakes they never would have made before. Formations broke apart. Attacks lost timing and precision. Meanwhile, America's industrial machine was only just waking up. New carriers were already under construction. New pilots were being trained at a scale Japan could never match. The balance was no longer equal, and both sides knew it. Admiral Yamamoto understood the truth before anyone else. Midway had failed. His plan, to lure the U.S. Navy into a decisive battle and destroy it, had collapsed. Instead, Japan had lost its strategic initiative. From this moment forward, Japan would react. America would decide where the war went next. That realization was devastating. Publicly, Japan downplayed the defeat. Official statements were vague. Casualties were minimized. The Japanese people were not told the full scale of what had happened. But inside the naval headquarters, there was no illusion. The war had changed direction. For the United States, Midway was more than a victory. It was proof. Proof that Pearl Harbor had not broken them. Proof that intelligence, preparation, and adaptability could defeat even the most feared navy in the world. Proof that Japan could be beaten. Morale surged. Sailors who had entered the war uncertain now believed victory was possible. Commanders who had been cautious grew confident. The fear that had followed Pearl Harbor finally began to fade. Yet, Midway did not end the war. It opened the door to something far bloodier. Within weeks, American planners turned their eyes south to the Solomon Islands, to Guadalcanal, to a long, grinding campaign of island hopping that would stretch across years and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Midway made those battles possible. Without Midway, there is no Guadalcanal, no steady advance across the Pacific, no path toward Japan itself. The battle was short. The consequences were permanent. At sea, wreckage drifted for days. Broken aircraft, twisted metal, oil spreading across the water. Somewhere below, the carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu rested in silence, their era over. Naval warfare had entered a new age. Battleships no longer ruled the ocean. Aircraft carriers did. Intelligence did. Timing did. Midway proved that wars could be decided not just by firepower, but by information, and by moments measured in minutes. And one final question remained. Was Midway a miracle, or the result of decisions, risks, and human error that could have gone the other way? History often turns on moments that look small at the time. Midway was 4 days long. 4 days in a war that lasted years. 4 days in an ocean that stretched endlessly in every direction. Yet those 4 days decided the future of the Pacific War. Japan entered World War II believing speed and shock would bring victory. Pearl Harbor, Singapore, the Philippines. One rapid success after another created the illusion of inevitability. The Japanese Navy believed its carrier force was untouchable. Its pilots are unbeatable. Its strategy is flawless. Midway shattered that belief, not because Japan lacked courage or skill, but because modern war punished certainty. At Midway, everything aligned against Japan. Overconfidence, rigid planning, and a failure to imagine that the enemy could see through their intentions. Their plan was complex, elegant on paper, and fragile in reality. When one assumption failed, the entire structure collapsed. America's advantage was not luck alone. It was preparation under pressure. Codebreakers working in cramped rooms. Pilots flying outdated planes against superior fighters. Commanders are forced to make decisions with incomplete information and no margin for error. Midway rewarded flexibility. American torpedo squadrons were nearly annihilated. Many pilots never returned. Their attacks failed tactically, but they pulled Japanese fighters low, scattered defenses, and bought time. That sacrifice mattered. Minutes later, American dive bombers arrived from the clouds and changed history. In war, outcomes are rarely clean or heroic. They are chaotic, uneven, and shaped by people making imperfect decisions under unbearable stress. Midway is remembered because it reveals that truth. It reminds us that dominance can disappear faster than it is built. That experience can be wiped out in hours. That momentum, once lost, is almost impossible to regain. After Midway, Japan fought on, but always from behind. Each island captured by American forces was another step closer to Japan's home islands. Each battle cost more men, more planes, more hope. The path led through Guadalcanal, the Central Pacific, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and finally to the brink of invasion. Midway did not end the war, but it made the ending inevitable. For the United States, Midway became a lesson carried forward. Intelligence mattered. Coordination mattered. Air power ruled the seas. These lessons shaped every major operation that followed. For Japan, Midway became a wound that never healed. It was the moment when expansion stopped and survival began, when bold plans gave way to defensive desperation, when initiative passed forever. And for history, Midway stands as a warning. Wars are not won only by strength. They are won by timing, by information, by the ability to adapt when plans collapse. At Midway, silence mattered as much as firepower. The pause between decisions, the delay between launches, the moment when fate waited for one squadron to arrive from the sky. History did not turn because of one man, one ship, or one bomb. It turned because opportunity met readiness. And when that moment came, the world changed course over an empty stretch of ocean called Midway Atoll. What followed was a long road to victory, and the beginning of the end for the Japanese Empire. Sometimes, the most decisive battles are not the largest. They are the ones where everything hangs in the balance for minutes, and nothing can be undone.